Tonight, you step inside a world where silence has weight, and sleep is a form of prayer. In a stone house far from cities and clocks, medieval nuns learned to meet their wakefulness with mercy, not medicine, not despair, but small obediences. A cup of warm fennel, a folded blanket, a whispered psalm. The great silence begins after Compline. The lamps are shaded, the corridors breathe, and the world grows soft enough to rest upon. Let's drift there together to learn how medieval sisters dealt with insomnia and how they made peace with the long, kind night. The bell is small, and the sound is round and kind. It hangs in the corridor like a single drop of warm light. When it speaks, the day exhales. Compline has ended. The great silence folds over the house, soft as wool. Footsteps fade, one by one, into the timbered dark. A sister passes with a shaded lamp. The flame is tamed to an ember's halo. The air smells of beeswax and linen, wood dried by many winters. You stand still and feel breath settle into a slower measure. A prioress's counsel lingers from the reading. Moderation, discretion, peace in small obediences. Beds in the common dormitory receive each of you like patient boats at a quiet quay. Straw whispers under the linen. A blanket remembers the day's warmth. You touch the coarse weave and think of fields. You rest your fingertips on the rim of the pallet and think of the rule that holds the night like a harbor wall. It does not force sleep, it makes room for it to arrive. In this world, night comes in two pieces, gently divided by prayer. Many rise again in darkness, and many return again to rest. The body learns the bell's tides as seagrass learns the moon. Wakefulness sometimes waits at the edge. It does not always announce itself as trouble. Sometimes it is only brightness lingering in the mind, a psalm syllable that refuses to dissolve. You draw the blanket to your shoulders. You trace the grain of the wood. The mind begins to gather its scattered flour into a single loaf. Work done, words spoken, worries that still reach. You breathe through them, slow and even. The silence is not emptiness. It is a wide, quiet table laid for rest. The sisters call this hour the house's gentlest lesson. Even the rafters seem to hold their breath. A mouse considers a crumb and decides against it. The night forgives small matters. In the dark, you notice how your body owns a wisdom that daylight often hurries past. Shoulders uncoil when the neck is warm. Breath steadies when the jaw loosens. Thoughts grow quiet when a steady rhythm is near. You lie listening for the next bell, not as a threat to sleep, but as part of sleep's path, a turning in a long, kind road. In the dormitory, pallets rest in two modest rows, heads to the wall, simple chests at the feet. No curtains flatter privacy. Wood pegs keep garments off the floor. Shoes point outward like small boats ready to push from shore. You notice how the room's order lightens the mind. There is a place for each thing and, because of that, a place for rest to stand. The prioress once explained why the beds are near one another. Companionship without chatter, warmth without fire, vigilance without suspicion. You feel the sense in your bones. A visiting sister told of a house that keeps a single lamp burning by the door until louds. Yours lets darkness work more deeply and saves the wick for need. The choice is not severity. It is trust that sleep will come when the world narrows and settles. You lie on your right side, as taught, so breath finds its even road. Hands rest one upon the other. Jaw loosens. The small band of worry that circled the forehead lifts and slips away like a ring taken off in kindness. The blanket is rough where it touches the cheek, and that texture is a friend. Sensation invites the mind to dwell in the present rather than loiter in tomorrow. Somewhere near the window, a straw tick sighs as someone settles deeper. Someone coughs and grows quiet again. Sounds do not demand to be named. they pass like clouds and leave the sky of the mind unchanged. From Compline's hymn there remains a single phrase, te lucis ante terminum, that rides the breath without clinging to it. You do not recite so much as lean upon what the words have already built inside you. A room, a table, a lamp whose light is not in your eyes but in your chest. When a thought arrives, a piece of work left half done, a face that turns sad, a phrase you wish you had said, you lay it on the table and let the lamp keep it for the morning. Not refusal, custody. The cool of the boards beneath the bed comes up as a faint story from the wood. Seasons of expansion and rest. Summer heat the boards once held and gave back in creaks. Winter's thin singing along the grain. Your hand finds the rim of the pallet as if finding a shoreline in the dark. You think of sisters who once lay here and now lie under kinder soil, and of others who will lie here when you are no longer counting the hours. The thought is not melancholy. It is like hearing an old psalm tune from a distance and knowing the words without saying them. In the corner of the dormitory, a small basket with mended stockings waits for morning. You remember the way the infirmarian taught you to thread a needle by breath. Inhale to slide the thread through the eye, exhale to draw it even. It was a joke, perhaps, or else everything in this house belongs to breath. Tonight you use the same rhythm to ease the mind's seams. You do not deny the day, you allow it to be finished. When the mind tries to count hours, you let it count touch instead. The fold of wool at your shoulder, the line where straw meets wood, the shallow dip where your hip rests and then lifts with each exhale. Counting this way returns you to a body that is not a problem to be solved, but a guest to be made comfortable. If thought insists on arithmetic, you give it a gentle sum it can do while you drift. 2 breaths to soften the jaw, 3 to settle the shoulders, 4 to widen the belly, 5 to loosen the hands. By the time you reach 7, you have forgotten the numbers, and the forgetting is the point. From the refectory there remains the memory of warm barley and a pear poached until it surrendered its edges. The counsel to take supper earlier did its quiet work. The cup taken at dusk has not asked the stomach to wake and argue. The kitchen has already gone dark, the ladle resting against iron cooling with a round, contented sound. You are glad of that ladle because it too is a witness. The day's care was enough. There is no need to stir what is already still. This house believes that sleep is not captured but welcomed. You think of the rule again not as iron but as a harbour wall that keeps storm waters from your palate. The wall does not command the sea. It allows rest to gather behind it in a pool of gentler current. You have learned by slow practice that obedience is not about shrinking your life until nothing remains. It is about enlarging the peace that holds everything you actually have to do. The great silence is the felt shape of that peace. It is made of small obediences, the lamp kept low, the voice kept within the chest, the steps set down soft, the thought laid aside with blessing. You imagine the bell that will later sound for the night office. In the imagination, it is already kind, already a hand at the shoulder rather than a tug at the sleeve. You understand why the night comes in 2 pieces here. It gives the mind a chance to empty and then to empty again like a cup rinsed twice, the second rinse catching what the first left clinging. You will rise when the bell speaks. You will return when the psalm set you down. Thinking of it now does not wake you further. It draws a map of the night across your chest and shows you the soft road you are already on. Somewhere near the door, a sister shifts and lets out the smallest breath of laughter at what you do not know. It harms nothing. A warm brick, wrapped in cloth, lies at the foot of your bed and gives off its small kindness. The warmth travels up through the ankles into the calves, and by the time it arrives at the knees, it has forgotten its own name and become simple ease. You had once thought such things indulgent. Now you know they are medicine, the kind that does not pretend to be grand. The infirmary taught you this, and so did winter. You turned the pillow once, not to chase coolness, but to mark the moment you let go of the day's last sharp edge. The window is a darker square inside the dark. It does not ask to be looked at. If the moon is there, it keeps its own counsel. If there is rain, you will hear it later, or perhaps you will not. The world will continue in its patient way without your watching. You learn this nightly and are surprised every time at how much relief there is in it. The breath prayer you chose tonight is mercy. You breathe the first syllable as the body takes in what it needs. You breathe the second as the body gives back what it does not. If another word arrives, rest or peace, you let it sit beside mercy like a sister on a bench. Words do not compete in this house. They companion. The prioress says, that is what we are for each other, and for our own unquiet hearts, not bosses, companions. You let that thought settle its arm around your shoulders, and do nothing more. A small creature in the rafters makes a sound that is not quite a scurry, and not quite a sigh. You place it with all the other sounds in the cupboard you keep for night noises, and close the door gently. One by one, each worry follows. The letter you will write tomorrow, the cloth you will mend, the garden bed that will need turning before frost. You do not deny them room in the house. You simply assign them morning rooms, and there they stay. Now sleep begins to arrive without announcement. It enters as the brother of breath, as the cousin of warmth, as the friend of stillness. You recognize it not because your thoughts stop, but because they begin to prefer softness to clarity, images to argument, rhythm to grammar. When you roll to your back and then to your left side, the pallet keeps you as if it had been carved to your measure. The blanket learns the new lay of your shoulder as a hand learns a familiar cup. You do not remember deciding to close your eyes, or rather, the eyes decided without you. You think, for a last brief moment, of the garden at noon, how the herbs keep their counsel then, too, each holding a cool secret in the heat. You promise the garden, as if it were a person who could be promised, that you will be gentle with it tomorrow. It answers as gardens do not with a word, but with a slow exhale of scent that the memory breathes on your behalf. When the bell finally speaks, it will find you near the edge of waking, or else deep and content, and in either case the sound will be a companion and not a thief. For now, you tumble down a short slope lined with straw and wool and simple, good rules. The slope levels into a meadow whose grass you know without seeing. Across that meadow is a small house with a lit window that is not a window but the word mercy, and you walk toward it without effort and find, before you arrive, that it has already opened its door. The dormitory holds many breaths, and they braid themselves into one slow rope. Pallets line the wall, each with its narrow space, each with a small wooden chest and a folded garment. The winter boards remember many nights. They creak when weight arrives, then fall still. Somewhere a sister coughs and subsides. Somewhere wool rubs linen like a cat against a leg. The house learns these sounds and becomes softer because of them. You stand in the doorway for a moment and let the room's hush wrap you as a shawl would. Each pallet is plain. A tick of straw or chaff rests on boards raised on simple trestles. A linen sheet lies over it, a blanket over the sheet, and in bitter months a second blanket is granted. For a novice, the mistress shows how to shake the tick so the straw redistributes and the small hills lie gentle beneath hip and shoulder. She speaks not as a commander but as an elder sister whose hands have learned the slow craft of comfort. The point is not luxury. The point is peace. You take in the arrangement of the room the way a sailor reads the harbor he has entered 100 times. Windows set high so eyes do not go wandering. Pegs for garments so cloth airs and does not dampen. Chests aligned so lids lift without knocking elbows. Aisles wide enough for night steps that seek the door without stumbling. None of this is ornament. Each is a form of kindness given in advance to the body that will need it, perhaps at an hour when words would be too much. The great silence lives here not only as a rule but as a design. Your hands trace the folded edge of a blanket that feels rough against the fingers and yet forgiving under the cheek. Wool wears memory well. It holds day's heat and lets it back in a slow tide. Linen carries a different virtue. It stays cool where the skin wants coolness. It breathes. Someone has stitched small initials at the hem. You run your thumb over the letters and remember how many nameless hands, beyond this house, have woven and washed and mended, so your rest might arrive as if by itself. Gratitude lowers the shoulders without telling them to. It is its own soft weight. When a new sister comes, the mistress of novices does not begin with psalms or rules. She begins with posture. Let the spine find the straw, she says, and shows by lying down herself how the body becomes a reed boat upon a river that knows the way better than the passenger. Let the jaw loosen, she says, and touches the hinge so the face unlearns the day's clench. Place the hands like this, one upon the other at the belly, so breath knows where to go. A dozen small lessons like these, and the room is already softer because one mind is less troubled. No curtains partition these beds, and that, too, belongs to peace. The absence of cloth between sisters makes each gentler with her sounds and with her turning, because she knows that sound will be heard and turning felt. In another house, you once heard, there were screens. Perhaps in that place a different need ruled. Here, the open room is its own teacher of charity. In winter, openness shares heat. In summer, it shares air. In every season, it shares awareness. You are not a solitary, and that is not a loss, but a shelter. The window is a square darker than the dark around it. In the evening it is shuttered, the latch felt but not seen, the wood closing with the quiet pull of a breath drawn and held. Some winter's felt is sewn to the sill to greet the wood and soften the meeting. Some summers, the shutter stands with a sliver open, so night smells can enter and settle damp stone, herb, the faint sweetness of beeswax cooling. Light at night is ivied with obedience. No lamp burns here without cause. If it burns, it is shaded. You have learned to trust the dark, the way one trusts a friend with good hands. At the foot of the bed, a brick wrapped in cloth gives off a small, constant kindness. The infirmarian prepares it in the warming room before Compline, laying a hand on the cloth to gauge its temper. Too hot, and the kindness becomes a scold. Too cool, and it is only a memory of care. You lift the bundle, feel the heat press into your palms, and slide it under the blanket at your feet. The body answers as if a door had been closed against a draught. Warmth travels upward with the patience of a hymn. When wakefulness lingers, permission lives here alongside rule, like a candle beside a book, each in its place, both useful together. You may step softly into the cloister for air. You may ask for a thicker cover. You may stand and change the lay of the tick to release a stubborn seam. You may, for a little, sit with the infirmarian in the room where a lamp is allowed to burn. The obedience is not to stoic endurance, but to peace. In this, the rule is bell and balm. Its sound calls you to rest. Its hand lays rest upon you. The room has its low music, cloth against cloth, a small whistle in someone's nose that soon resolves into quiet, the sound wool makes when a sleeve slides against a blanket, like a cat in the mind of a child. If the door opens for the infirmarian's rounds, the hinge is kept oiled. The light is cupped in a palm and set down as one would lay a sleeping infant into a basket. You listen and learn what the sounds are called. You learn which ask for answer and which ask only to be allowed. Sleep grows like ivy against such knowledge and climbs it without effort. There are nights of wind. When the rafters sing, you feel the roof's old bones bend in friendship with the weather. There is nothing to fear in a friendly bending. On such nights, you tuck the blanket nearer at the neck, Draw the cap over the ears if winter stands outside the shutter with a hard face, and remind the body that inside is safer than outside, and the bed is inside. It is a simple reminder, and enough. On gentler nights, summer brings a change, and the linen is cool and patient. You lay a hand on the sheet and feel the way it gathers the day's warmth and sets it free like a keeper who loves his birds more than his cage. As for garments, the night tunic is looser than day wear. The cap, when worn, is light. A belt is not needed, unless a sister must rise quickly for a duty. Then it lies folded at the chest's corner, so fingers find it in the dark. The mistress of novices shows you how to roll a cloak at the foot of the bed so it can be fetched without sound if a draught finds its way inside. She shows you where to lay your shoes, toes outward, and how to set your stockings so the heels meet the toes and keep each other warm until morning. Such craft is not fuss. It is the smoothing of the road. Cleaning is its own lullaby. In the afternoon, the dormitory is swept. In the morning, when needed, the ticks are opened and the straw turned. Linen is aired, never draped over a bed where it might gather damp. Blankets are brushed and folded. You have learned the smell of clean wool and how different it is from new wool, which wants to prove itself. Clean wool is like an elder whose stories have been told enough times to be calm. When you lay your head upon such a blanket, it does not ask you to admire it. It only asks you to sleep. There are rules for speech here, and they are gentle and precise. After Compline, the great silence holds. No words unless charity or duty demands them. Charity means the cough that will not quiet is met with warm water. The foot that has stubbed itself is led by a hand. The worry that has flooded a young face is answered with a nod and the softest of smiles, which is a kind of speech. Duty means the bell, the infirmary, a message that must move from one room to another. Everything else waits in the morning's basket, and the basket is large. Not every bed knows the same peace. Some are restless islands while others are harbors. The restless bed teaches you to remove what is needless, a fold that bites, a thread that scratches, a thought that chews. The harbor bed teaches you to keep what is needed close by, the cap laid where it may be found in the dark, the cloak folded so that one movement opens it, the brick wrapped with care so it warms and does not scald. In both cases, you learn by touch and by the simple experiment of kindness. When a sister is ill, the bed follows her into the infirmary, and the room follows her too, in the sense that the habits of this place, cleanliness, measured warmth, low light, permission go where she goes. You have sat at such bedsides and learned that sleep sometimes visits the one who is not lying down but keeping watch. The chair remembers the weight of that watching and is therefore honest when you sit in it tonight, lighter than those hours but kin to them. You do not think much now of why you first came to the house, or how the world outside organized its nights with shutters that did not close and lanterns that tried to be suns. Here, the dark is not a failure to be corrected. It is a gift to be received. When the door is shut and the room is set and the great silence has been laid over you like a second blanket, the mind knows where to stand and what to do with its hands. It does not need to point or measure or name. It needs to breathe. Somewhere in the dormitory, a sister sits up, swings her feet to the floor, and rests them there, as if asking the boards whether they will hold her if she stands. They answer with a small sound that is half wood and half winter. She stands, adjusts her blanket, and lies down again. You do not see this. You sense it the way one senses a change in weather with closed eyes. The room teaches you that seeing is not always knowing, and listening is sometimes more precise. There will be other rooms in your life, and you will bring this one with you. You will carry the habit of folded things and the memory of wool's patience. You will carry the rule's kind harbor wall and the infirmary's small bell. But for now you are in this room, and it is in you. You lay a palm on the linen, and it is cool. You tuck your chin toward your shoulder, and the blanket is rough and then is soft, as if it had changed its mind because you asked nicely. You feel the air at your throat move in and out as a quiet friend, and you sleep. Darkness grows a hinge, and then it opens. The bell speaks with a small round note that feels like a hand upon your shoulder. You rise as water rises when the tide slides under it. No yanking, no surprise, only a lifting that was always going to happen. The cool of the boards greets your feet. The wool of your garment carries the day's soft record. But now it is a night garment, and it hushes as you move. The corridor breathes with you. A single lamp, shaded, shows the way by showing very little. What is not light knows to be still, and let your steps pass. In the church, the air is older and thinner, not from neglect but from use. The nave has been breathing for centuries. Candles, permitted here, lift their small domes of light and give back to the eyes a measure that belongs to prayer rather than to work. You bow with the others and take your place, which is not a seat so much as a rhythm marked in wood. The stall has learned your hands, and they have learned it. The bell yields to antiphon, invitatory, psalm. You do not so much sing as let your breath be pulled along the line the chant lays out like a gentle path on a hillside. Vigils matins, if you say it so, does not interrupt rest. It is the rest that knows the difference between sleep and prayer, and does not quarrel with either. The mind stands and releases what it held without knowing, a worry about a word that was said carelessly, a small envy that felt bigger than its true size, a crease of sadness at the edge of the day. The Psalms do not ask you to perform feeling. They lend you theirs. One speaks of shelter, another of light, another only of God's long memory, which swallows your short memory whole and turns it sweet. You open your mouth as the others do, on pitch if you can and near it if you cannot, and let the syllables be boats. There are nights with more reading on feasts. The lessons swell, and the voice of the reader travels further before it is caught by the pillars and turned back toward you. There are nights with fewer, when the body's heaviness is honored and the prioress gives a slight nod, and the pages turn more quickly. Either way, the pattern is a mercy. Antiphon, psalm, antiphon, reading, responsory, silence between. In those small silences, you stand with everyone else and let your breath fall down the length of your body, the way a cloak falls over shoulders. The cold finds your cheeks and stands there politely. You nod to it as to an old acquaintance. The invitatory psalm, when sung well, is less a summons than a returning. Come, let us sing to the Lord. Yes, but the coming feels like going home and the singing like the quiet talk of a house that knows its own beams. When the nocturnes divide the night, you mark the hinge by the smallest repositioning of the feet. The body keeps the map when the mind has set it down. Readings are mild. The lector's voice is not eager. He or she does not roll syllables like sweets. The point is not to impress. The point is that words happen in the dark, and the dark is willing to let them. Your breath takes on the length of the psalm tone without your asking it to. Each line teaches the lungs a way to be long without strain, to carry sound like water carries a lily leaf. When the verse ends, the breath ends. When the response begins, the breath begins. It is a simple apprenticeship, and it works even when you are not attentive. The heart watches the lungs do their work and decides to slow down. The hands, feeling unnecessary, go gently still. Candles make small islands on the choir desk. You see just the page and nothing else. The ink is brown where it was once black. The parchment holds its faint animal scent in winter and its faint vegetable whisper in summer. If you must turn a page, you do it where the music turns too, so the sound does not stumble. If your eyes, which are not as young as they were, ask to be excused from the tiniest notes, you let the sister to your left carry them, and you carry the line that falls to you. The music does not care who carried what as long as it was carried. Sometimes the prioress sits a little back from her place and listens more than she sings. She would deny that she is tending anything, but the house knows the look of tending. After the second nocturne, she rises and bows, and everyone bows, and the bow is shallow, because deep bows are for daytime. You have learned a bow for each hour, the bow of greeting, the bow of thanksgiving, the bow of I am tired but willing. Tonight is the third. It fits the shoulders well. When the hymn arrives, if it arrives this night, you do not seek the comeliness of your own voice. You gladly take the comeliness of the hymn instead. It has more of it, and it is willing to share. The antiphon before the Benedictus at Louds will later do the same. The old words make company. Where your mind would make company of worry, the hymn offers companionship of mercy. Where your body would keep company with chilled stone, the hymn gives companionship of shared breath that belongs more to warm lungs than to cold flagstones. You do not know when precisely your jaw ceased its quiet pride and decided to relax. Perhaps when the lector said a line about sleep in peace and get thy rest. Perhaps when a psalm spoke of lying down and rising again because the Lord sustains you. Perhaps when a candle sputtered and then remembered itself and burned steady, and you, remembering yourself, stopped attending to anything but the path of the tone. Either way, your mouth hangs now with the smallest dignity, and your shoulders, whose struggle is always to climb, have stepped down 2 rungs, and are leaning upon the back of the stool like a traveller upon a staff. There is, at times, a cough that will not stop, and then stops. There is a dropping of something small, and then not small, because it is night. There is the sound of pages in hands, and of breath in lungs, and of time behaving itself. There is a sense, which you would call more than a sense if you could, that the night is not empty and you are not alone, and the world is both wildly large and exactly this size. You prefer, as always, exactly this size. When the last response is sung and the last bow becomes standing again, when the candles are cupped and pinched and their smoke rises and becomes a sort of grey ribbon to tie the hour closed, you go back the way you came. The door does its good work, the corridor breathes, the dormitory accepts you without questions. Your hands remember the blanket's edge, your hip remembers the bend of the tick, your head tells the pillow that the conversation begun earlier must now continue. It does so without words. Second sleep has its own flavor, not richer than first sleep, not poorer, but different. It is like a second steeping of a leaf that still had its giving left. Your body, having stood in a cool room and sung words that were there before your mother and will be here after your daughter, decides that the arguments it had started with itself can now be concluded with handshakes. The mind, which likes to count, discovers that the bell has made counting unnecessary because there will be another bell, and somewhere in the space between bells there is nothing to tally. You lie on your right side again because it is a good side, and you float. If, for a while, you remain wakeful, you know what to do, and so you do it without urgency. You take a breath that begins in the nose and ends in the belly and then returns the way it came, but slower. You repeat a word that is not importantly chosen. It works because it is simple, and because it was breathed out by many before you. Mercy, peace, rest. Sometimes, you let the word be a person's name, and give it into the night the way a woman gives a child, into the hands of someone who loves children. You do not hold on to the giving. The door closes softly. The night returns its sounds. A small scritch becomes not mouse, and then once more mouse. The mind releases it from symbol back into creature. A sigh becomes not a metaphor but air leaving a chest. A distant drop of water happens somewhere that is none of your business. You like that. It is not all your business. What is your business has been sung. Everything else is stone and wind and God's sleeplessness. You remember the psalm that spoke of the guards keeping watch in vain unless the Lord keeps the city. You are not a guard. You are a sleeper. You are permitted to sleep. You are instructed to sleep. You obey as gladly as you obey the bell. It is perhaps your favorite obedience, because it asks you to pretend nothing and to do what your body most wants to do. You place your hands as the mistress taught. You draw the blanket how the infirmarian suggested, and you let the second sleep come as if you were not the first person to have invented it. Often, dawn will be kinder because of this. When Lord's calls, you will stand up already halfway to gratitude, and the light will meet you not as a sheriff but as a friend with a jug. You will drink. You will work. You will remember what happened in the night not as accomplishment but as belonging. You will think, briefly and tenderly, of the lesser candle that burned low and again of the bell that spoke, and then you will put even those down and be content to chop leeks or copy letters or stitch a hem. If, in the morning, someone asks whether you slept, you will say yes or say no, and either answer will be true because rest is larger than sleep, and the night gave you what it could. You will do the same the next night and the next. And sometime many nights from now, perhaps, you will be the sister whose cough does not stop and then stops, and someone younger will think, for a moment, that the world is precisely this size, and they will be right. A door opens on a milder room, a room that is allowed to be warm. The infirmary is not a palace, it is a prudence. A small stove keeps water near the edge of a simmer. A lamp is shaded but not ashamed of itself. Its work is to let hands see what they are doing. Shelves hold linen folded so precisely that corners speak of peace. Beside them sit small vials sealed with wax, each labeled in a hand that wastes no flourish. Fennel, rose, valerian, lettuce seed, quince, anise. A stool waits where feet can find it. A chair keeps company with the lamp for talk that is not quite talk. You enter, not as a conqueror of sleeplessness, but as a guest of those who study it kindly. The infirmarian does not ask at once. She looks, the way one looks at a page before reading it, and then reads, the angle of your shoulders, the color at your cheek, whether your hands rest with purpose or with apology. Only then, in a voice like warm water, does she ask what the night is doing in you when wakefulness began, what you last ate, whether cold found your bones, whether the mind is a hive or a field after harvest. The questions are simple and sequential. They give your answers a place to sit. If the story is of heat that rises and refuses to descend, she makes for a cup that is more cradle than doctrine, warm water, a little honey, a thread of almond milk on fasting days, a scent of fennel that does not argue but suggests. If the story is of dryness in the head and the heart, she thinks of lettuce, not as leaf alone but as a patient friend when steeped lightly and not asked to speak too loudly. If the story is only of a mind that is afraid, she teaches you to breathe as the lamp breathes up a little, down a little, in an arc that asks nothing of the nose but gentleness. Sometimes she grants dispensation and names it openly. You may sit here until drowsy comes. The rule bends at the point of care and then stands straight again. The bending is not a break, it is a bow. She will note it to the prioress in the morning, a small line without drama, and that too becomes a balm, because mercy accounted for is mercy shared. In the house's ledger of the night, your wakefulness is not a scandal, it is a line item under the column marked attention. She shows you the footbath, and the bowl itself makes an argument for rest, shallow, glazed, a color like quiet clay. The water enters the basin and becomes a small weather system that is always summer. Feet that were stone become flesh again. Heat ascends into the calves and informs the heart, which had been trying to do the night without the body, and has now been reminded to keep company. You dry the feet with a towel warmed at the stove linen that whispers a little as it drinks. Temple and wrists receive a hint of oil. Rosemary is a brave scent, but here it is only a ghost of itself. It remembers the garden without disturbing the room. The infirmarian's fingers move with the attention one gives to fragile things that nevertheless endure if treated rightly. She promises nothing. She tends until the body remembers how. The vocabulary here is gentle, cool without chilling, moisten without dampening, calm without quieting to the point of fear. It is the practice of near words, of the fine line where aid does not become insistence. The bed in this room is narrower than in the dormitory, and the linen is cooler. Its virtue is cleanliness completed and completed again. If you must lie here a while, the lamp burns its small circle until your eyes begin to prefer closed lids to open ones. If your watch is to be sitting rather than lying, the chair teaches the back not to curve into complaint. The infirmarian checks the small things without saying all their names. Whether the blanket's fold at your throat makes air a friend or a visitor, whether the mouth's corners want oil, whether the ear is cold where it should not be. For some, the mind is the trouble, and the body follows it down the wrong road. Then the infirmarian unrolls a field of very simple practices the way a farmer unrolls an irrigation ditch. She teaches counting that is not arithmetic, 5 breaths in, 5 out, and then surprise at how quickly the 5 became 6 without anyone commanding it. She teaches keeping a word on the tongue like a seed. She does not choose for you which word only offers a handful. Mercy, rest, peace, enough. She teaches a way of setting a thought down that is more graceful than throwing it away, placing it in the lamp's circle, where it warms lightly and is not allowed to roam. On a small shelf, live papers with careful lines, the house is quiet science. After feast eves, one note says in that same spare hand, wakefulness often lingers in 2. The next line advises a cup earlier by an hour and a shorter reading before bed. Another paper, storm nights seem to shake the mind loose, with a small drawing of the window latch and a wedge of wax. Another, winter, bricks wrapped at Vespers, not at Compline, hold their temper better. These are not laws. They are footprints left by sisters who walked the night and wished those who came after them an easier path. If you are troubled by dreams, she listens without trying to be a prophet. Sometimes the dream is only a day's crease ironed the wrong way, and sometimes it is a fear putting on costumes. She asks whether you took supper late, whether a word was spoken at dusk that troubled you, whether the work of the day wanted finishing and was not finished. She does not chase symbols around the room. She takes the dreams off the head and places them in the same basket as the unwashed cup or the unreturned knife. Morning things. They can bear the daylight. They do not deserve the night. Scent plays its small part. A pot with crushed anise is set near enough to the lamp to be warm but not enough to speak too loudly. A string bag of quince hangs at the window when air is high and thin. Its fragrance says that sweetness can be patient. When the season allows, lavender dried in bunches is not waved like a wand. It is set in the room where it can be found later as a memory rather than flung now as a command. No one is enamored of stronger drafts. They are known and circled in the notes, and then they are left in the circle. This house trusts simple cups and repeated nights. There are techniques for hands as well as for lungs. She shows you how to rest the fingers so the hands believe they are no longer on duty. Palms laid atop one another at the belly, thumbs answering one another like friends who agreed to walk together and actually did. She shows you how to loosen the scalp by letting the jaw hang and moving the tongue in a slow circle once, twice, as if the mouth were learning to sip air. She shows you how to lay the eyes behind the lids, as one lays a blanket on a sleeping child, edge-aligned, corners set, and then no fussing. Sometimes, because Mercy is clever, she assigns you a few lines to copy in the morning, not as punishment, but as promise. The lines are from a psalm that does not shame the wakeful, or from a homily that remembers bread. You will pin the copied page into the margin of a book used at table, or fold it into your chest's corner, or share it with a sister who does not yet know that words can be carried this way. The promise steals dignity from the worry that wanted to accompany you back to bed. It prefers not to be embarrassed. It leaves. The infirmary is a place where seasons gather their wisdom. In spring, damp air finds joins in wood and in joints alike. The remedy is often more walking before bed and less sitting. In summer, heat lingers in the head. The remedy welcomes cool linen, a lighter blanket, a cup that leans toward mint only enough to calm. In autumn, the mind tallies and must be told it can tally in the morning. A pear poached soft can be more persuasive than a speech. In winter, there are nights when the brick is the best theologian in the house. It says, warmth is allowed. It comes from beyond you. Keep it near the feet, and it will find the heart on its own. You stand to go. The infirmarian does not ask you to prove your drowsiness by falling asleep in the chair. She does not make of improved wakefulness a test. She looks again, as she did when you came. And this time, she reads that the shoulders are lower, the jaw is less proud, the eyes are content to close when they close. She gives you the lamp's small circle for 4 steps and then takes it back when the door has learned the hinge without complaint. In the corridor, a darker darkness accepts you and improves you. You walk by knowledge instead of by light. In the dormitory, the room you left now receives you as if you had been away for a season rather than an hour. The bed is a country you recognize after foreign travel. Only the foreignness was into yourself. You lie down not as a soldier lying down a burden, but as a field receiving the rain that was always meant for it. The brick warms through cloth and thought both. The blanket reassumes its shepherding. The pillow remembers the curve of your head. If sleep does not come at once, you know what to do. If it does, you do not stand on dignity. You go with it as one goes with a friend who has finally arrived and should not be made to wait at the door. In daylight, the herb beds seem ordinary. Leaves, stems, soil, a border of stones that have held many seasons. At night, remembered by scent, they come closer than sight. You could walk the rows with eyes closed and name the neighbors with your nose. Lettuce first, cool, tender, a leaf that speaks in a small voice but keeps its promise when asked gently. Fennel next, sweet in the breath, a friend to the chest that holds too tight. Valerian near the edge of order, earthy, a little wild in its speech, faithful when called upon with measure. Poppy seeds sleep in strict obedience here. Their stronger kin are known by name and distance, and are asked to stay where mercy and rule agree they should stay. The bed edges are modest walls, stones that the sisters have turned and settled until they no longer wobble. Paths run between like small rivers that have known many feet. The infirmarian prefers sun for fennel, but not too much. Shade for lettuce when noon grows proud. A patient half-shade for Valerian who likes to keep some secrets. She plants to the rhythm of bells and seasons both. Sowing and harvest are confessions and communions, in a language the house learned long before your mouth made vows. Drying is its own liturgy. Leaves that should be gathered fresh are gathered fresh. Leaves that need to lie down for a season do so on racks where air is a kind usher, turning the congregation gently without breaking them. Linen bags keep their quiet counsel on a shelf. Each bag receives a neat label, a name, a date, a small remark. This year's fennel sings more, one says, meaning the seed rattles when the bag is lifted and whispers that it has kept itself dry. Lettuce seed from the south bed milder, says another, which means the cup will be softer on a night when the mind needs suggestion rather than insistence. The garden's tools are simple and honest: spade, hoe, a knife that refuses to preen. You take them in hand and feel how the handles have become round with use. Spring lets you think you are beginning the work, but the earth knows better. It has already done most of what must be done. You are here to companion that work and to refrain from troubling it. Weeds are pulled not because we hate them, but because we love the plant next to them more. The difference matters. Love makes steadier hands. You learn the garden's calendar by breath, inhaling when the ground releases the scent of damp soil turned, exhaling when the cut of crushed fennel rises sharp then sweet. Bees are your tutors, patient and absorbed. They do not hurry you, which is their most convincing lesson against haste. When you carry water, you carry it low, so it can be poured without splashing. When you water, you do not soak leaves that prefer their feet washed to their hair. You think, as you work, that this is how the night is tended. Small measures, accurate hands, and the restraint that separates care from overcare. The infirmarian keeps a notebook, a small one, not proud where she copies both the learned and the tried, but the tried is written thicker because it was paid for with seasons. Fennel, the page says, for breath and tightness, steeped, not boiled, offered early. Lettuce, the next line, for heat in the head, let it think it is a leaf still. Do not cook it into a sermon. Valerian, a line below, earthy and persuasive with those who do not listen to the lighter voices, small draught, watched, and not given where dreams are already too busy. In the margin, a small drawing of a cup with a line halfway up. Measure. You learn that there are nights when the garden helps best without entering the cup. A sprig of rosemary near the lamp, not in the oil. Fennel seed warmed in the palm and held to the nose. Lettuce leaves, washed in cool water and laid upon the forehead for a moment, as if to persuade the heat to make its descent. The infirmarian does not despise small arts. She despises only violence, even in the name of sleep. Sleep is not a hill to be taken. It is a creature that comes when the room is friendly. The garden is a school with many masters. Birds instruct against theft by stealing what they need only, and leaving what they do not. Worms instruct against perfection by turning what you admire into what you will admire again when it has become soil. Rain instructs against schedules by visiting and neglecting with an innocence that tramples your lists. You accept these masters and become less of a master yourself. That, too, makes a better night. No tyranny of self over self, but a listening. Some plants counsel against themselves. Valerian, if taken beyond measure, can tangle a dream like thread around a spindle spun too fast. Fennel is friendly, but if asked to sing too loud for too long, the throat grows tired of sweetness and asks for water instead. Lettuce wants to be leaf. You do not make it wine. The house's notebook is full of such small prohibitions, and they are always written beside their companions. Small permissions. This much, not more. At this hour, not later. With this word, not alone. At harvest, the infirmarian invites hands that do not belong to the infirmary to join. The kitchen learns the smell of dried mint and the feel of fennel between its fingers. The scriptorium learns that a twig near the page can be as persuasive as a stern thought. The porter learns that a sprig at the door is a way of greeting not only noses but minds. You witness how medicine without ownership becomes common good, and common good becomes an atmosphere that people breathe without remarking upon it. The night likes such atmospheres. Once, in high summer, the garden refused the night. The heat was a presence that would not sit down. Then the house adjusted, not by scolding the heat but by moving itself. Supper pushed earlier, beds aired more vigorously, bricks set aside, cups cooled before they were sipped, readings shortened, feet bathed before Compline rather than after. The infirmarian wrote in her small book, "Heat thinks itself a king. It is only weather." By the time the knights remembered how to be knights, peace had not been lost, only taught a different route. In winter, the garden lives in the storeroom and in memory. Linen bags answer when asked, not before. Vials stand their patient watch. The beds outside wear frost that looks like a careful hand has dusted them with light. You walk the edges anyway, and say the names out loud, not because the plants can hear, but because lips that say fennel, lettuce, rosemary, valerian are different lips when the bell calls the night to prayer. Names ground you. Ground holds you. Earth asks very little from those who do not fight it. Sometimes, when you cannot sleep, you imagine yourself walking the rows. You step along the path where small stones show and do not harm. You kneel at the fennel and do not pluck a thing. You sit on the low wall and let the scent of rosemary become memory and not command. You stand and bow slightly to the lettuce, as one bows to a child being very serious about its small task. You return to your bed with soil on your hands that is not soil and a cool on your brow that came from no water you can name. Imagination, here, is not fantasy. It is rehearsal for peace. The garden teaches you to measure by mouth, by hand, by hour. Mouth, a draught that does not flood. Hand, a pinch that is a pinch indeed, not a fist. Hour, earlier is kinder than later. Cups belong to dusk, not to the edge of the pillow. The infirmarian trusts such measures the way a sailor trusts a rope. It is not that ropes never break, only that a rope well kept is more reliable than a vow screamed at the sea. In the evening, you help prepare bundles for the infirmary. Rosemary that will go to oil, fennel that will live in a jar, lavender that will become a memory in the room where the lamp is allowed. You label them in that spare hand. You are still learning. You avoid flourishes, not because flourish is sin, but because the eye at night deserves clarity. You set the jars in place with the gentleness of someone setting down a sleeping child. The hand cooled by rosemary learns the page's slower tide. Tonight a few lines will cradle breath. When the bell rings for Compline and the great silence gathers, the garden does not object. Plants have always kept silence more strictly than people. You pass the beds as a shadow with a bowl that needs no water and find, hours later, that the scent of rosemary and fennel and clean earth has followed you indoors and slipped into the dormitory without asking. No one will accuse it of breaking the rule. The rule, if it had a mouth, would smile. Your last lesson of the garden is this: everything here grows by being placed and left, with small returns at the right times. You place a seed and leave it. You return with water. You leave it. You return to pull a weed. You leave it. You return to praise bees you did not hire. You leave it. You return to cut stems you did not lengthen. Sleep, you realize, is also this. You place yourself where sleep grows: cool linen, warm feet, quiet breath, a word like mercy, and then you leave yourself there. You return if needed, gently. You leave again. The night does the growing. Sometimes reading is a candle that does not flare. It is a wick that glows without smoke. You sit where the mistress of novices taught you to sit, spine like a reed, hands quiet upon the edge of the desk, breath low, and the page before you becomes a shore where thoughts arrive and are welcomed without ceremony. The book is not long. It is not meant to be conquered but kept company with. A psalm commentary that remembers mercy. A life of a saint that remembers bread. A homily that is mostly cradle. The sentences lie down one after another and make a bed for drowsy mind. Lectio divina here is not study. Study is the bright labor of day. Lectio at night is the dim labor of rest. You do not harvest. You graze. You do not prove. You receive. The page has been chosen for softness, for lack of edges, by a librarian whose eyes know what the hour can bear. Not too new a hand, she says of the book she lends, meaning not too angular a script, not too tight a gathering of strokes that would scold the eyes. Not too many glosses, she adds, meaning marginalia that would awaken curiosity and send you roaming. She chooses a page like a mother chooses a lullaby. The parchment smells faintly of animal and ink. In winter it holds that memory more closely. In summer it breathes it out and gives you back something like grass. The ink here is brown where it was once black, softened by years of fingering and weather. It makes the page less a proclamation and more a murmur. You follow the line not with your finger but with the small movement of your lips silently, because it helps breath find word and word find heart. Your eyes do not hurry. They do not know clocks. They know the way light falls in a room and when it means enough. You have learned to turn a page where the sentence turns, so sound would not stumble if sound were being made. The librarian taught that too. Turn where the thought exhales, she said, and she demonstrated with a page that had taught many before you. You saw the corner lift just as a phrase fell still, and the new page arrive with the next breath. Everything in this house seems to prefer that rhythm. Lift, fall, inhale, exhale, dusk, lamp, bell, silence, vigil, sleep. Lectio most of all. The script is a quiet hand clear enough that the eyes are not asked to plead for meaning, modest enough that they are not asked to admire. In another book, the hand is tighter, more angular, and it asks more than night will allow. That book waits for noon. Here you have the hand that keeps to the middle path. Capitals are not proud. Serifs are not barbs. The letters sit like chairs around a table that has seen many meals and many small reconciliations. You sit with them and feel fed. If the book you hold came from the scriptorium here, you can see where Sister Agnes paused and warmed her fingers. You can see where she smiled at a misdrawn stroke and allowed it to be, because the hours do not demand flawless lines when eyes will be heavy. If the book came from elsewhere, a visiting hand is recognized by its slightly different patience. You greet it as you would a guest. You move a little to make room and ask nothing of it that it cannot give. You have become a reader of readers, a companion of companions. You begin, and the first line is a promise that the page will not argue. On this psalm, the commentary says, "Note that the soul breathes in peace not by force but by order." You do not mark the line with ink. You mark it by letting breath agree with it once, twice, and then forgetting even to agree. The next paragraph speaks of lying down and rising again, and of waking not as failure, but as a visit of duty. You feel less accused by your wakefulness, which was already quieting in the infirmary or in the dormitory, and more accompanied. The text keeps you without pressing upon you. You read with your whole face, though you do not know you are doing it. When the sentence speaks of mercy, your lips round as if to drink. When it speaks of bread, the corners of your mouth know to soften. When it speaks of fear, the jaw briefly stiffens and then loosens again, because the next line is gentler. You have been told to read with all your senses at night. Eyes for seeing, lips for shaping, ear for hearing the silence between words, nose for the faint scent of parchment and lamp that signals safety, skin for the cool of the desk where wrists rest. This fullness makes you quieter, not busier. The librarian, when asked why certain books are kept for night and certain for day, says simply, because night favors a certain kind of truth. She does not mean untrue things should be saved for darkness. She means the true things that are gentle, that do not require inquiry's spear, are more at home with the lamp than with the sun. In the morning, truth demands tools and field work. At night, truth offers bread and water and a blessing for sleep. When you feel the old impatience, learn, conclude, move on, you let the page help you rest from it. A line from a homily says, "Be content to be content," and though in daylight you might laugh at such an obvious thing, at night you see that obvious things are the deep ones. And repetition is not insult, but comfort. You read the line twice, 3 times, not because you must memorize it, but because it breathes well. Now and then your thoughts run crow-like to shiny things in the margins. A small gloss notes a saint's name. A tiny palm points to a story. A faint correction shows where a scribe once made a letter shorter than it should have been, and did not hide the error with pride. You let the crows fly a circle and return, their wings slow. They decide there is nothing to steal tonight. They perch and sleep with one leg tucked up, and you return to the main line. The librarian, a patient woman with a voice that sits close to the body, taught you 3 measures to keep the reading sleepward. First, begin with touch. Before you open the book, lay your hand on the cover and feel the cool. The body learns from skin as well as from sight that nothing abrupt is required of it. Second, begin with a word you already know: mercy, rest, peace, and read the first sentence through that word as if it were a lens that softens light. Third, stop while kindness is still present. Do not prove strength by reading past the place where sleep will find you. Leave a lamp in the next room, so to speak, which is the last sentence you read. You try it now. Unwilling to admit you have become fond of rules, but fond nonetheless of ones like these. Your hand on the cover, your chosen word peace laid along the line like a slender ribbon. Your eyes down the page until a sentence that is almost a lullaby. You stop there, breathe once more, close the book. The sigh the page makes is as soft as a fold in linen. The room, which had felt arched with attention, settles as if it were a cloak falling from a shoulder to a chair. The librarian keeps, near the lending desk, a small shelf for night books. On it sit not only psalters and homiliaries and tiny lives, but also a few volumes of letters written by people who knew how to write letters that had only kindness in them. Dear sister, one begins, sleep when you can, as the Lord does when he pleases. He does not ask the stars to explain the night to him. The letter writer is far away and long gone to God. And yet this sentence has arrived here now and can be borrowed by anyone whose hands carry it to a bench and whose breath agrees with it once before sleep. You remember the mistress of novices speaking of the danger of learning too much at night. Night is for the heart to be taught its gentler things, she said with a smile that made you sure she meant it. You asked, which are the gentler things? And she answered, the ones you can breathe. It did not make sense then. It makes sense now. You hold a sentence in your chest, the way a singer holds a note in the mouth, without sound, and the sentence holds you back like a rope when you start to fall into thinking too fast. There is, in the scriptorium, a running joke about hands. The day hand, they say, is proud of itself and insists on showing all its cleverness. The night hand is shy and will only do what is needed. You have watched both hands in motion, your own and others, and you have seen truth in the joke. In daylight you turn pages with intent, tallying. At night you turn them as if each page were a bird you encourage to fly again. Birds fly better when you do not clutch them. Some of the books bear small repairs, laws of charity stitched into parchment. The sewing is even in older volumes, nearly invisible in newer ones. Both kinds keep the sheet from tearing further when a finger or a season pulls hard. The librarian told you that such men's are themselves lectio. The page was read, and while reading, someone took the time to keep it readable. In the night, you feel the stitch lines as your fingers brush the page, and you think of how sleep and mending are cousins. Things are rejoined in the dark. The evening's lectio has another custom, to end not with a flourish, but with a word carried away. A word can be a pillow. You choose mercy tonight, another night, enough, another, rest. You do not choose victory because you have no battle, only a voyage down a quiet river. You close the book and say the chosen word once inside the mouth and once inside the chest, and you feel it lodge there without weight. The door in your mind that likes to stay open to noise closes, because it sees someone important has arrived and prefers to meet them in the morning. If you have the strength, you copy a line in a neat hand after you read it, a hand you hope will look like the librarian's one day, plain and spare. Your copy goes not into the book, but onto a small paper that lives in your chest's corner. In the morning, You will pin it into the margin of a communal volume, a lectern book perhaps, where eyes that are not yours will stumble upon it, as if the line had grown there overnight. Lectio thus goes on when you are busy washing or kneading or sweeping. The page continues breathing in the scriptorium, even when lungs are not present. When your eyes begin to prickle, when the lines braid themselves into a soft rope that no longer asks to be untied, you obey not the page but the body. You lay a piece of linen between the page and its neighbor, not to protect ink from oil, though it does, but to mark your stopping place with gentleness. The librarian calls the linen a rest, the way a musician calls a silence a note. You close the book over the linen and let out the breath you were unconsciously holding. You do not know this, but the librarian does. The order in which books are shelved is itself a remedy for restless minds. Soft first, then simple, then sweet, then the letters. Lives on the shelf below. The harder books are 2 shelves down and slightly to the left in a shadow that says, tomorrow. Once, sleepless, you reached for them. The librarian's hand arrived before yours did, not as a rule but as a mother. You may read them at noon and sleep through them, she said gently. At night they will read you, and you will not sleep. You laughed and let your fingers meet the soft shelf instead. You have learned to enjoy the smallest of rituals at the end. The way the lamp's edge of light retracts from the page when you shield it with your palm. The way the desk's grain catches a one-finger caress. The way the bench makes a sound that is half wood and half blessing when you stand. You place the book upon the shelf, the way a nurse lays a child, with the quiet that says the day is done and the night belongs to larger hands than yours. Sleep meets you more quickly for having been taught by letters that did not argue. You step into the corridor carrying a word, and with no need for light more than the lamp's memory. In the dormitory, you place yourself again where sleep grows cool linen, warm feet, quiet breath, and the word slides into the chest like a stone into the pocket of someone who knows where they are going. It reassures by weight, not by noise. You turn your face toward the wall and breathe the chosen word once more. By the time you begin the second syllable, eyelids have already become generous. The basin is shallow and wide, glazed to a soft shine that remembers many nights. The infirmarian carries it to a bench and pours water that steams in the lamplight. Your feet, cooled by stone, meet the warmth and are surprised into stillness. The body listens to the feet, and the feet tell a story of arrival, of roads traveled in small rooms, of steps along the cloister, of standing in the choir stall with breath as company. You feel blood move, as if it had been waiting for a summons. Breath deepens. A towel warmed before the stove is passed into your hands. This is not a bath for cleanliness. It is a bath for remembering how to be at home inside skin. The water reaches the ankles, and the ankles tell the calves, and the calves speak to the knees, and the conversation climbs. You learn to rest the heels upon the basin's bottom, to lift them, to rest again, to let the water do the small work of persuading tightness to lie down without argument. The infirmarian says little. Her silence is a kind of instruction that does its work as well as any word. Temple and wrists receive a little oil. Rosemary is the base when the season allows. In winter, a whisper of rose hips makes the rosemary less green and more warm. In early summer, a faint memory of lavender lies in the bottle like a friend who does not speak first. The oil is not poured, it is breathed. A drop upon the fingertip, then the slow press to the temple where thought often stands too near the gate and tries to collect tolls late at night. Not your work, the touch says, and the gate sees reason. The wrists are anointed along the thin river that runs where the hand meets the arm. The motion is not a rub, it is a press and a release, a liturgy for skin. The pulse, often shy, shows its face. Breath hears the pulse and, relieved, decides to keep pace with it instead of running ahead in worry. Hands warmed thus are less inclined to instruction and more inclined to peace. A warm hand forgives the day's small mishandlings, and the body forgives the hand. The infirmarian keeps a small tray of oils, each one labeled in the same spare hand that labels jars in the garden. Rosemary, lavender, quince, a touch of marjoram when joints are stubborn. She does not love ambitious mixtures. She loves faithful simples. She is careful with poppy. Its name appears only in a note with a circle drawn around it, a reminder that some sleep, though potent, is borrowed from obligations better kept. The house does not despise borrowed coats in a storm. It does, however, return them quickly and with thanks. Your feet, having learned again the conversation of warmth, are dried with a cloth that was warmed on a chair back. The infirmarian shows you a motion you had not known, from toes toward heel, long strokes that cancel the day's standing. Across the arch, a small pressure that answers a string drawn too tight. Around the ankle bones, a circle that feels like a quiet hymn sung only for them. She says nothing of science. She speaks of tending. Tending, you realize, is a science with fewer arguments. If the head is hot and the feet are cold, the old books advise, invite the feet to be hosts. The invitation is warm water, oil, a brick wrapped in cloth, a blanket that meets the ankles as kindly as it meets the throat. Invitations do not command. They make a place ready and open the door. The body, not scolded, often walks in and sits down. The breath has its own regimen. You sit with the feet upon a folded cloth and place one hand upon the lower belly. The other hand rests at the chest. The infirmarian teaches a rope of words for the breath to climb. In on 4, out on 6. In on 4, out on 6. Repeat. And if a thought demands attention, give it a seat and continue. She suggests tying a single syllable to the exhale, the end of mercy, perhaps, or the second half of peace. This keeps the mind from addressing invitations not meant for it tonight. Hands have their anxieties, and they are answered with oil, too. Not much. A drop spread thinly, then gathered back to fingertips so the hand is not drenched but comforted. The knuckles are stroked, the web between thumb and palm is pressed with the gentlest of convictions. The fingers, one by one, are reminded of their good work and their rest. Work and rest are not enemies in this house. They visit each other daily. You learn a way of laying the eyes under their lids that seems childish until it works. You look down with eyes closed and then sideways and then up, very slowly, as if drawing a circle that has no need to be perfect. The circle draws sleep's attention the way a very small bell draws a child's attention. A line from a book you read earlier sits in memory and does not scrape. It rests the way a hand rests upon a table after washing a cup. The body reads this, too. The infirmarian instructs in the making of a scarf for the head, light and not tight, for winter nights when heat climbs into thought and refuses to descend. The scarf is not to bind. It is to remind warmth to stay with the body where others can keep it company. You learn the knot that does not press the temple, a knot that lies at the nape like a well-behaved guest. There is a small brick upon the stove's side, kept for those who like the comfort of a weight near the feet. The brick, wrapped in cloth that has been folded upon itself and pinned, holds a warmth that is not a shout. It knows how to walk slowly from sole to calf and from calf to knee, the way an elder climbs a stair while telling a story. You are not asked to be interested in the story. You are asked only to refuse to interrupt. Sleep prefers stories it does not have to follow. Sometimes the hands that anoint are yours. The infirmarian teaches you how to tend yourself without exciting the self's unfortunate admiring gaze. It is a quick lesson, then a slower lesson. Quick. Take little, move slowly, stop while peace is present. Slow, do not mistake the desire to be coddled for the need to be kind. Night reveals the difference, kindly, because it likes kindness more than coddling. and after a while you do too. There is talk, sometimes, of dreams. Not much. The infirmarian is not a chaser of shadows. If you speak of a frightening dream, she answers not with interpretation but with a cup and a hand warmed in oil. If you speak of a sweet dream, she smiles and says it is well to be loved by the night. If you speak of no dreams, she says that sleep has many faces and that each is honest in its way. Your breath becomes more tolerant when your mind is. The converse is also true. In the corner is a stool where the very old sit when night presses upon their joints. An oil with marjoram speaks more loudly to such complaints and is allowed to do so as long as it does not drown out the rest of the room's conversation. You have learned to listen for that drowning. It sounds like the mind wanting to make a rule. Rules exist already. The oil can be a friend without being a king. The room's warmth is not everywhere. It is where it needs to be. The stove gathers a small halo, the lamp a smaller one. Shadows are deliberate. You place yourself so that part of you is shadowed and part is warmed and lit. The boundary between the two is where drowsiness likes to walk. A hand moves across that boundary and decides it does not care to stay awake after all. It goes where the brick is. On shelves rest cloths folded with decisiveness. You have been taught to fold cloth decisively and to wash it well. Cloth that is uncertain makes the skin uncertain. Cloth that is certain quiets it. You take a towel from the shelf, and it has the feeling of a sentence that knows where it is going and does not fear being heard. You press it to the feet, and it teaches the souls a little grammar. Subject, warmth, verb, rests, object, you. The door to the corridor is open now, and then to let out a thin seam of steam that will otherwise put too much summer into the room. Air takes the invitation and goes. A new air comes in, cooler but not angry. You find your place within it, changes very little. The water cools, you are dried, oil remains a memory on skin. The memory is stronger than the cooling, it makes you lighter. When you stand, the floor is cooler than the basin. It is good that it is so. Your body recognizes difference and accepts it as a sign of the house's order. Here warm, there cool, here light, there shadow, here oil, there wool. You do not make poems of it at night. You obey it by lying down where the blanket and the brick and the pillow and the breath are waiting the way friends wait by a gate. You carry back into the dormitory not the smell of a garden fair, but the faintest suggestion of rosemary and clean linen and warm water remembered. Your neighbor turns upon her tick and does not wake. She knows this scent and the small change it makes in the room's weather. You lie down. Your ankles remember. Your wrists remember. Your temples remember, and no longer ask to keep the gate. If wakefulness remains a little stubborn, the infirmarian has given you a practice that does not care whether you are upright or lying down. It is counting that is not counting. Breath in, 4, breath out, 6. Then add a word to the exhale. Then remove the numbers and keep the word. Then remove even the word and keep the motion. The steps are not a staircase. They are a path through a meadow that narrows and then widens. It would be odd to hurry here. You do not. On winter nights when the world outside talks too loudly of itself, wind against shutters, rafters making their friendly but insistent song, you are permitted to keep the scarf upon the head and the brick near the feet and the oil near the wrists. You are not permitted to scold the wind. You are encouraged to let it pass from outside to outside, not to pull it into the room where it does not belong. You smile at the thought of the wind patiently speaking to the shutter and the shutter answering without words. You choose to be the shutter tonight, not the wind. The infirmarian taught that the body has its own liturgy. You know some of its parts now. Washing at the basin, anointing at the temples and wrists, wrapping the feet in the towel, then releasing them. Lying down, a breath with a word, and then a breath without a word. The dismissal is not sung but is felt when eyelids go heavy and refuse to be negotiated with. It is the gentlest dismissal you have ever known, more of a blessing than a departure. You sleep, not with triumph but with relief. The night, which does not hold grudges, receives you without keeping accounts. The oil sinks where it was placed and will say nothing in the morning about its good work. The brick cools and will be warmed again, and will again be no boast. The water in the basin will be changed, the towel will be washed, the room will be made ready again for others whose names and nights are not yours. It comforts you that readiness continues without your management. There will come a night when you will be the one to lift the basin and pour the water and warm the towel and press oil to someone else's temples. You will speak as the infirmarian spoke and be quiet as she was quiet, and your hands will remember motions your mind did not think it remember could. That night will be like this and also not like this, and you will be grateful for both. For now, the room opens the corridor to you, and you return to the dormitory to continue the sleep you have not yet finished. A sleep that will join itself to the earlier one and will be called rest by anyone who saw you and did not need to name it more precisely. Kindness continues in timing. Cups belong to dusk, not to the pillow's edge. Evening bread is modest and good. You do not hunger for grandeur at night. You hunger for peace. The kitchen knows this and cooks accordingly. A pot has been at the back of the fire since late afternoon, not boiling itself into fury, only humming. Barley and carrot and leek speak quietly together in the broth. A small piece of onion persuades without insisting. When the bell sends you to the refectory, the long tables receive bowls that remember the hands that carved them. A sister with steady wrists pours, and the steam rises, and the room's breath slows as if the soup had already done its work before the spoon arrives. The house keeps a rhythm that helps every sister find her own. Work, prayer, bread, quiet, lamp. Supper sits within that rhythm, a soft stone in the riverbed. Salernitan counsel repeats itself across centuries until it sounds like common sense. Avoid heavy meats late. Avoid crowds of spice that stir the humors into loud conversation. Welcome modest sweetness only when it behaves like consolation and not like clamor. Almond milk stands where milk may not on fasting days. It is thinned until it comforts without burden. A pear is poached until its edges resign their sharpness. Honey is invited in a spoon small enough to be called a kindness rather than a habit. You take notice of timing as if it were an ingredient. A cup taken earlier leaves more rest for later. Dusk is a friend to the gut. Let the mouth be quiet before the mind is asked to be. The infirmarian writes in her small book of night notes. She suggests an hour between cup and Compline, another gentle hour between Compline and bed. In that time, the body practices sinking instead of climbing. The kitchen cooperates. It is a theological kitchen in its way, believing that rest is a sacrament passed hand to hand, from cook to bowl, from bowl to spoon, from spoon to breath. On feast eves, the table brightens. A little cheese appears where cheese is permitted. A handful of herbs leans toward the nose before it leans toward the tongue. Laughter happens at the doorway and tries to hide itself. It is forgiven for failing. Even then, restraint is part of the joy. The cook errs on the side of mercy for the night that is coming. You have learned that sugar can be generous at noon and treacherous at sunset. A kind date is cut in halves and shared, and even that is sometimes saved for the morrow. The bread is honest, the fruit is honest. Honesty is easier to sleep with. On fast days, the kitchen's imagination becomes a soft craft. Almond milk thickened at noon is thinned at dusk. A broth that would have carried a chunk of fish carries instead a handful of barley that holds heat as well as hunger at bay. The infirmarian watches not only the strictness of the fast but the story of the body that will lie down later. Too thin, and the night grows teeth, she notes. Too rich, and the night grows tongues. Between teeth and tongues there is a path called ease, and supper walks it. You learn to listen to utensils as to bells. A ladle rests against iron with a small round sound that says nothing more is needed. A knife meets the board and stops without drama. Spoons make a plain music against bowls, and then they quiet. Clean plates stacked at the end sound like a hand closing a book. The refectory's long tables hold more than plates. They hold the knowledge of many winters and many small corrections that together make a peaceful night. Avicenna, in his careful way, advises that sleep follow digestion, not sit upon it like a heavy guest. He is echoed by 100 kitchen hands, the majority of whom never read him and yet know his counsel by bodies taught well. Leave room, the cook says, tapping a ladle against the rim of a pot. Leave room for the night to come in and sit down. Leaving room is not deprivation, it is hospitality. The stomach that is a good host does not wake the mind to complain about its guests. The infirmarian keeps maps that are not of places but of seasons. Autumn asks for soup that remembers root and earth. Winter for bricks and blankets and fewer raw leaves that bring coolness where coolness is already king. Spring for greens that speak of water. Summer for cups that know how to carry coolness without turning it into a shiver. Menus shift with these maps, not out of fashion, but out of charity. The night pays attention to seasons even when you do not. You learn to pay attention to the night. You notice how a table set without hurry changes your breath before you sit. Each bowl is placed as if it mattered which way the grain of wood runs beneath it. Each cup stands where a hand will not knock it when the lamp is dim. Bread is cut so a crust can be next to crumb for those who need one and then the other. A sister who goes to bed cold eats the end of a loaf and warms from the inside. A sister who goes to bed hot eats the slice from the middle and cools without being chilled. The cook knows who is which without many words. Words are not the only vocabulary of care. Sometimes the infirmarian will advise you to step quietly after supper, not to chase sleep, but to walk the first few steps in its direction. Let the food rehearse the falling, she says, by letting the feet fall softly. The cloister receives these steps, the corridor accepts them. The body rehearses peace with legs and lungs both. When you return to the dormitory, the bed feels like the second line of a sentence you have already begun writing with your souls. The punctuation is the blanket. There is a small shelf in the kitchen where nightcups wait. The jars do not shout their contents: fennel, anise, rose, lettuce seed. A hand, trained by repetition, knows how much is a pinch and how much is a persuasion. The cups are measured by hour as much as by spoon. This one an hour before Compline, this one directly after the reading, this one not at all tonight, because mercy sometimes means no cup. You grow calm in the face of that shelf because it looks like competence without pride. When those of the house who copy texts have long afternoons, they do not deny that eyes and necks and backs make their own case for an evening of care. On such days, supper comes a little earlier. A cloth warmed upon a chair back is folded and carried to the dormitory. A footbath is drawn. The night has been set up to receive the body that will arrive at it. This is not luxury, it is foresight. The rule did not write menus. The rule wrote mercy into the way menus are conceived. The refectory reading at supper is mild on purpose. You eat with the ear as well as with the mouth. A passage about bread is better than a passage about battle. A story of gardens better than a story of grief. The voice is low and unhurried. You chew the words and the barley alike. If a line mentions lying down in peace, you do not smile at the obvious. You accept the blessing at face value and leave the smiling for morning. There have been mistakes. A winter passed, someone served a spice too eager, and the room did not sleep. A summer ago, someone served fruit too cool, and the room shivered despite the heat. These are remembered not as scoldings but as footnotes. Do not let this be a rule. The infirmarian writes beside such entries, "Let it be a story." Stories are easy to sleep in. Rules are for daylight, when wrists are strong and minds are tidy. When a sister cannot keep food because sorrow has bent her, the infirmarian does not force the spoon. She warms a cup and places it in the hands, and lets the scent do the first half of the work. She says, "Nothing that would turn the cup into a task. Drink if you can," she says, and the body often can when the will is given a gentler friend. That, too, is timing of counsel, timing of silence. You learn a simple practice. After supper, stand a moment at the doorway to the kitchen and look back. Ensure the ladle is set down, the fire banked, the cloths folded, the knives turned away from the edge, the jars closed. It is not inspection, it is a liturgy of finishing. The body sees a room at peace and believes itself permitted to seek the same. A chaotic room teaches the opposite lesson, and then the night works twice as hard to undo it. The old Takuinum prefers tables to be shaded in summer, warmed in winter, and kept free of draughts and arguments alike. You smile at the pairing. Arguments unsettle the gut more efficiently than cold air. The house has learned to leave disputes for morning's feet. If a word must be said at night, it is a word of apology quickly spoken and more quickly received. Where peace is restored, bread tastes like food again and not like stone. On the rare evenings when guests are present and the refectory buzzes, the prioress raises her palm and flattens the air gently without humiliating the joy. "Save some for the morning," she says, and the morning, greedy and kind, stands ready to take what is saved. You have learned to love the saving. It tastes like having a second helping of rest. Tonight, the soup is barley and leek. The bread is honest. A little honey lies upon a plate like a coin the poor can keep. You eat, you listen, you breathe. You carry your bowl to the place where bowls sleep. You look back once. The kitchen is a completed sentence. You walk to the dormitory already drowsy, and do not call the drowsiness a failure of zeal. It is zeal rightly named. You undress in silence. You lie down. The body knows where the soup is now, and the soup knows where the body is. Between them, the night finds its place. When food has been kind, yet wakefulness lingers, a few quiet steps are charity toward the body. The cloister at night is a square of gentleness. 4 walks, 4 walls, a sky that is not a ceiling but a companion. Stone arches hold up more than a roof. They hold up a feeling you have learned to call safety. The garden is a darker shape within the square, an island of leaf and stem that sleeps whether or not you do. You step softly, not to placate a rule, but to align yourself with the hour. The rule does not despise necessary steps. It despises only the kind of steps that run from peace. The novice mistress taught a way of walking that refuses to wake the mind again. Eyes quiet, not chasing the far arch. Gaze allowed to rest upon the air a few paces ahead. Hands folded or at the sides where they say to the shoulders, "Be low." Breath in the measure of a slow hymn. Not counted now, only remembered. If thoughts insist, she taught a small kindness. Touch the cool stone of a pillow with your fingertips and let the chill climb to the temples, then turn away. Permission is not indulgence here, it is a tool. You use it like a carpenter uses a plane to smooth what would catch. Stone remembers the day and gives back warmth to the souls as you pass. The garden, night cool, returns you to breath by scent alone. Rosemary does not perform, it attends. If a leaf moves, it is not a sign, it is a leaf. If a shadow goes from one wall to another, it is not a narrative, it is a cloud. The body, raised on lessons of meaning, relearns the lesson of being. This is a corridor for the verb to be, not for the verb to do. Let being ripen, the mistress said, and being learned too. On one side of the square, a door leads to the infirmary. On another, to the refectory, on the third, to the church, on the fourth, to rooms that do not need you tonight. Doors that do not need you are friends. You pass them without apology. The door that does need you, the one that will open to your bed, waits until your steps have spent the small anxiety that would otherwise have climbed into the sheets. Anxiety is less nimble after 2 turns of the cloister. You count turns without numbers. First, the walk where the air sits upon the skin. Second, the walk where the stone's echo changes its depth. Third, the walk where the garden's scent leans nearer. Fourth, the walk where the breath has taken to slowing without being ordered. 4 is enough. The discipline here is not heroic. It is ordinary, which is more reliable. Heroes keep the house awake. Ordinary people let it sleep. Sometimes a sister shares the square with you. Her lamp is shaded, its circle of light a moon that stays politely within one hand's reach. You nod and do not speak. 2 steps in parallel do not become conversation. They become companionship with no demands upon language. If the night is winter, your breath shows itself once and then disappears. If summer, it disappears and then shows itself later as dew upon the sleeves. Either way, the body learns its size again and stops pretending to be larger than the square. The roof lets in a piece of sky. Stars do not instruct, they keep company. A thin cloud passes, and you are glad not because it made a symbol, but because it proved again what you have been learning, that change can pass overhead without requiring your hands. Leaves above the garden hold still, then tremble, then still again. In the morning, when work requires decision, you will be able to remember how some things tremble and then settle without your solving them. The great silence is a rule, but it is also an atmosphere. It is made by the lamp carried properly, and the hinge oiled regularly, and the steps set down as if each stone were a sister's shoulder. It is made by the permission to walk and the choice not to run. It is made by doors that close without grievance and by windows that do not ask to be opened to the night's gossip. You have come to love it not because it makes you good, but because it makes the house kind. When you reach the 4th side again, you decide whether to make another 4. Decision is not debated, it is read from the body. If feet have turned from stone to skin, if shoulders have become part of the night rather than an argument against it, if breath has become a low bell that rings without being rung, then you go to bed. If not, you travel the square again. You have learned that 2 squares is often enough for worry to forget its shoes. 3 is rarely needed. 4 is a story worth telling once a winter and then forgetting in favor of simpler nights. There is a practice, whispered rather than taught, for those evenings when thought will not cease from speech. You let the mind say 1 sentence, and then 1 sentence only. You nod to it, as to a visitor who has come late and cannot be turned away, and then you let it sit upon the bench like any visitor and watch the garden with you. It is astonishing how polite a thought becomes when seated. It is astonishing how quickly it leaves when not chased or fed. If a sister passes with a message, she takes the path inside the cloister, so that lamps do not disturb the square. If she must speak, the words are for duty and are spoken near the ear. The message will be for someone else. It will not be a general announcement. It will not be a rumor. It will be a kindness that moves like a hand along a sleepy child's back, slow enough not to startle. The square approves of such messages and keeps no record of them. Your feet learn to walk as you have walked before, softly, as if along a remembered river. Lift, set, lift, set. You discover that second sleep is already in your souls, and that it will arrive at your head later. The body is not a single thing. It is a parish. Feet keep hours that the forehead only later attends. You obey the feet tonight. They were meant to be trusted. There have been nights when you walked too long. Those nights taught you what walking is not. It is not a competition with insomnia. It is not a march of conquering. It is not a test of zeal. It is a way to let the body feel the night without the bed turning into a small arena. The bed is not an arena here, it is a field. You return to it with the smell of rosemary in your sleeves, and the mildest of chills at your wrists, and the sense that the universe is both enormous and exactly the size of 4 walks and a square of sky. You enter the dormitory lightly. You do not check the window for weather reports. You do not check the door for fear. You lay down the way you laid down the ladle earlier, with a sense that the sentence is finished and does not require your signature. If you do not sleep at once, you know how to lie without making sleep your captive. You lie the way a garden lies in winter, placed, left, and visited by weather that passes without changing the garden's vow to be a garden when morning arrives. Sometimes a psalm fragment returns, the kind that spoke of lying down and rising, or of shelter and shade. You do not recite it, you let it lean against you like someone who knows your shoulder. It turns the bed into a place of memory rather than of demand. Then, being memory, it fades, and you do not call it back. You have learned not to reheat peace once peace is warm enough. In the morning, your steps will cross the same stones on the way to Prime, or to the kitchen, or to the garden, and you will feel that the square is different and the same. You will be tempted to name what the night did. You will resist, not because names are wrong, but because some gifts lose their right size when labeled too soon. You will remember the touch of stone at the pillar and the modesty of the lamp and the way breath took back its work from thought. That is enough to call the walk successful, if success must be named at all. You roll to your side, feeling already the second sleep's tide. The square of the cloister remains behind your eyelids as a quieter shape, an inner courtyard no weather can invade. You bring into it the word you carried from the book or the kitchen or the infirmary, and you set it down upon the bench like a folded towel. Sleep sits next to it. They do not speak. They have spoken enough. There is a way of standing at the corner before turning that belongs to this hour. You pause long enough to let the mind arrive where the body already is. You place your weight upon the foot that will stay, and then you let the other foot learn from it. Turns that are taught by feet and not by thoughts are gentler upon the bed that will receive you. So are corners. When snow comes, your steps mark it without writing in it. The square teaches even then that the point is not inscription but passage. When rain comes, the roof speaks its many small syllables and then is quiet again. Weather is a guest. The square is the house. You bow to both without serving either too eagerly. Night thins as if drawn through linen. The window grays. A candid bird tries a note, and then, encouraged, another. Breath deepens into waking without the jolt of alarm. The bell calls Lords, and the mind stands up inside you like a friend you have known since childhood. You rise. The boards are familiar. The garment is warm where the body has warmed it. In the choir, light lays a thin gold along the edge of a page. The psalms sound like water brightening. Sleep's gift lingers. It does not flee in shame when work approaches. It waits nearby like a good animal. Lords is not an interruption. It is the night's final courtesy, the bow at the end of a dance before partners let go of hands. You say the psalms that belong to morning and feel them lay a path across the day that is about to begin. Mercy first, then praise, then a small remembering of the night's kindness so that daylight does not grow proud. The light itself seems to listen to the antiphon. Candles look less necessary and still are welcome. The eye enjoys an easier work and promises to thank the hand that chose the hour. You notice how the chapel carries the night into the morning without breaking it. The floor still knows the footsteps of the night office. The stalls still know the weight of bodies that chose to stand when standing was the simplest way to stay awake. The same hands that held books now hold them again with none of the anxiety of performance. The words are not new, and therefore they are trustworthy. Dawn, which could have been a demand, feels like an agreement. After louds, there is a quiet migration to work. Doors open without self-importance. The kitchen makes its first sounds as if not to wake the house that is already awake. The scriptorium receives copies that will be made without haste. The garden greets hands that know where water is kept. You walk the corridor with feet that remember last night's 4 walks and decide not to make a plan out of them. Plans are for day, habits are for night. Now it is day, and you return to the small obediences that carry you to Vespers like stepping stones. You carry the night into the day the way one carries a slow song under faster work. Chopping leeks for dinner, you keep your fingers curled, and your breath steady and your thoughts uninterested in tallying. The knife is a metronome and not a judge. In the scriptorium, you turn the page where a sentence exhales and not where the pen has decided it is bored. Margin notes arrive with the gentleness you learned at Lectio. In the laundry, linens are folded with decisiveness so that skin later can be decisive about resting. Wool is brushed with a hand that remembers the blanket's kindness to your cheek. When a sister speaks an apology in the morning, because morning is often when apologies are spoken, you hear it as if you were hearing the last line of Compline, the one that makes room for sleep. Apologies at breakfast are like honey at supper, small, honest, and enough. You receive them with a nod and feel the night approve behind you. The night always approves of small reconciliations in daylight. They make its work easier when it returns. You attend to food and timing with a mind that has seen how little is needed. You eat enough to obey, not to conquer. You drink water when water is honest, and not to make a river inside a body that must carry a book for 6 hours. You choose to avoid sweetness that pretends to be strength. You prefer the strength that was given in the night by breath and cup and oil and stone. Such strength does not vanish when you wash your hands. The rule's mercy appears in small places. The sister who did not sleep is given work with hands and not with eyes. The sister who slept like a stone stands near the stove and gives her heat to others. The infirmarian has a new note at noon about warming scarves and cooling words. None of this is announced. The bell says what needs saying. The rest is an atmosphere you walk in like light. You glimpse the world outside the walls, and do not pretend it is smaller because you chose this house. It is large, and will be large later when you go to it again in some other hour of your life. That largeness no longer asks you to imitate it. Your square of cloister, and your square of window, and your square of page, and your square of table are sufficient shapes for learning how to be a person who sleeps and works and prays and forgives and walks and eats. The world is grateful for such people. It has enough heroes. Midday comes and you bow to it. The sun is bright and then not. Clouds address it like sober counselors. Wind changes the topic and then gives it back. You do not make symbols of it all. You are free to simply see. In the afternoon, you notice that the impulse to speak sharply is smaller because sleep was not fought last night but befriended. Friendship teaches tone. Sleep taught yours. Toward evening, the house begins again, its soft preparations. A pot finds the back of the fire. A brick finds its cloth. A scarf is laid out not as a requirement but as a possibility. You feel no tyranny in these preparations. You feel recognition. This is how we do kindness here. It requires small foresights. You think of the infirmary's papers, the garden's bags, the librarian's linens. Night is a craft that many hands make. You are one of those hands now, and the hand is lighter than you were told it would be. When Compline approaches, the day exhales again, and you exhale with it. You know the hymn, the path of its notes through the chest, the grain of its words along the tongue. You do not think you must be holy to sing them. You think you must be humble, which is easier and also more difficult, and also, tonight, exactly as possible as sleep will be later. You look down and then up, and let yourself be arranged by a bell that has arranged you many times. You remember that you once feared the nights and loved the days. Now you love both. You no longer ask them to be the same. They are two parts of a single rhythm. One teaches the other to keep time. Night taught day to be tender. Day taught night to trust that work will indeed be done and does not require the mind to do it in the dark. You lay this knowledge out like folded linen in a chest. You will use it again. It will be ready. Before sleep has a chance to wake too early, you promise yourself that if it does, you will not be rough with it. You will walk the square. You will take the cup. You will let the book be a lamp and not a ladder. You will put your feet into summer water in a winter room. You will let oil remember where mind forgets. Promises that are this gentle are easy to keep. The body likes them because they taste like being believed. You lie down, and the day finds a place to lie down inside you. Work has made its own bed and does not beg you to carry it into the night. You feel the brick through the blanket. You feel the sheet against your cheek. You feel the window remain a square that does not command sight. You feel the breath make room for a word that is older than your worry. You close your eyes because it is time to, not because you are clever. Morning will come with the same patience tomorrow. You will meet it with the same gratitude. That will be enough. And if morning brings rain upon the cloister and damp upon the sleeves, you will smile at the roof's careful grammar. Drop, pause, drop, pause. If it brings bright cold that puts a point upon the air, you will take it as punctuation and not as correction. If it brings a sister's tears, you will lend her the word you carried from the night and let her breathe it twice. If it brings only tasks, you will love tasks because they love being done, and you will let them be done without turning them into stories about yourself. The night taught you that greatness is a draught that cools quickly. Goodness is a cup that stays warm until you are ready. You will choose the cup. If work after louds takes you to the gate, you carry the night with you even there. You speak to visitors with a voice that remembers oil and brick and cup. You do not borrow the world's hurry to pay the house's debts. The house's debts are paid by hands, by hours, by the bell that says when to begin and when to end. You end when the bell ends you. And when dusk returns, you will recognize the slope toward Compline sooner than you did years ago. You will step onto it gladly, having learned that the slope is not a threat but a promise. The promise is simple, that rest can be taught and learned and offered. You are apprentice and teacher both now, and the night is generous with such students. Thank you for listening to Dream Phonograph. If your eyes are still open, may they close kindly. If they are already closed, stay as you are. Good night.